God, may the written word and the spoken word lead us to the living word. Amen. So come along with me on a bit of a story. It's been a busy day, or a stressful week, or an exhausting month, or maybe even a heavy season. Your shoulders are hunched, your eye has a twitch. The house and your mind and your soul are feeling cluttered. Your lists have lists, but none of them are getting done, and some of them have maybe gone missing. There aren't a lot of places to go safely, so it's another night at home, with not a lot to do, but not feeling very relaxed either. And literally out of the sky appears a tiny little balloon, just floating. And of course, it's not really tiny, it just appears to be. And it slowly floats south and just a touch east. You can just stay on the first one for a sec, that's fine. So we're just watching the balloon floating. And it's just a touch east across the evening sky. Faced with that little appearance, a balloon somehow floats on air with a combination of science and technology and maybe a little bit of a miracle. So what does a person have to do but drop all the distractions and the troubles and just notice? Notice that nudge that God is at our side and soak in the opportunity of a break from everything and just give thanks. Can we just go back to the Psalm slide just for a second? Oh, I'm not seeing it. Oh, we're on it. Sorry. I'm on two different screens here. Just the opening for my sermon. That one is perfect. Okay. Thank you. So as I shared the last time we gathered, the Psalms are a unique portion of the Bible that are written in a form of poetry meant to be led to music with all the instructions that will be needed for a musical director and the performers. And they also cover the whole range of our human emotions and all the ways we direct our fears and our hopes, our joys and our pain to God the Maker. So to me, they show the expressive and the vulnerable side of emotions, the times we bargain with God and cry out in the darkest times, but also the demonstration of relief and celebration and praise when our situation turns around. Today's psalm illustrates the rush of deep relief from a struggle, thanking God for coming through it safely. Quite simply, taking notice when God is at our side. So in this psalm, we see David leading Israel in giving thanks to God for past help and expressing confidence in continuing help. The psalm is saying that God, Yahweh, was not only present, but active in the lives of his people. And so David's kingdom was in danger, but any sign of strength and support from God was always welcome. Now today we might have different battles than what they would have faced in those times. So what I'd like to focus on today is not so much a physical real battle, and not to do with the persecution of a people, but rather the ways that troubles can fill our souls. We notice that troubles can swallow us whole, like a predator. We notice that troubles can quickly flood into our lives, threatening to drown us. And we notice troubles they're threatening to carry us off in a fast-moving stream. But what happens when we get some momentary relief from these troubles of our hearts and troubles of our souls? To me, it seems like sometimes, if we're aware, we can notice that God is giving us a little tap on the shoulder and breathing just a little moment of hope and joy so that we can have some relief and remind us to see beyond our present troubles. So now we'll go a slide over. Perfect, the small balloon. So this is the balloon we saw at our farm this week, which was so amazing, and that's our dog Missy was checking it out with us. So our family had this kind of a tap on the shoulder this week on Wednesday. Our first reaction was smiles and speculation. A hot air balloon is not a common sight this year, obviously. There were many things that were locked down during the early days of the pandemic, and hot air balloons was definitely one of them. So it wasn't common. My father-in-law told us something was happening, so we ran up to the top of the barn hill to have a closer look. And the evening light in August is just simply golden. So here we were dropping everything to watch the progress of the balloon with our dog Missy. And part of what countryside living is speculating where it's going to end up, because you have to know whose field it's going to be in next. And we knew it wasn't going to land in our field, so we had to keep watching. And there's the next slide. But the good news is my father-in-law and mother-in-law have a field down the road. So we had to hop into the van and in pursuit of this little miracle that was happening. Have you ever noticed that sometimes you just need something awesome to catch your attention? The size of this hot air balloon is, I don't even know how to measure it. It's bigger than an elephant, and it's amazing. So this fine fabric and this technical skill and some random gusts of helium, well, they aren't random, but to me they look random. Someone's deciding when the helium goes in, but all those things keep this amazing structure floating, and it's just awesome. So even as an adult, it reminds us that miracles and possibilities are all around us. So we hopped in the van, my mother-in-law hopped in her car and came behind, and we rushed to the field down the road. And a couple things that happen in farm country when you're landing a balloon is you can't land near animals. It scares the animals. You can't land on growing corn. Farmers do not like when you smush their corn. You can't land on soybeans. You can't smush the soybeans. You can land on cut hay or low-growing hay or wheat fields that have been cut. And we had just such a piece in my father-in-law's field that he had just harvested a few weeks ago. So they were hovering when we got there. And I will assure you, they were so careful. They must have asked him 8 times, "Are you sure we have your permission to land? And are you sure we have permission to drive in your field?" And we were all so excited, they had permission to do whatever they wanted. But yes, they asked permission first. So the next slide shows the crew that were in there. And I did ask them first if they would be okay with the picture. So if you look closely, you can see they're all smiling. Their eyes are smiling. That's how that works now with masks. They're very happy. So a few weeks ago, I talked about all the ways we're finding ways to adapt how we gather. And so Sundance Balloons is not an exception. They had their lockdown times, and I'm sure they've been very stressed because they're a seasonal company, and they're counting on the nice weather to do what they do. But now they're reoperating with many new regulations. And the group said I could take their picture, and I know they had lots of sanitizer, they had lots of masks, and lots of fresh air whooshing past them when they were up in the sky. And once they got out, they all separated again, so they had some time alone. And I know it's not for everyone. This is a basket full of people, and that's not something everyone can do these days. But they were. It was a nice reminder that we're finding ways to do some of the old things with some modifications to still bring joy to people's days. So the next slide shows the collapsing. And this is a huge process because that gigantic structure has to come down. So the crew safely maintained their distance from one another. And you can see my daughter, she's the one in front. You can see how large the balloon is behind her. And this part takes forever because they can't rush. The shape and the size and the opening makes it very slow. And rushing could cause damage or a tear to the fabric, and you definitely don't want that. But what I noticed was maybe that slow process reminds you a bit of God's time. We don't always know the schedule or the purpose or how long, but with patience and time, we understand the whole picture, and we understand that we have hope and strength along the way. So the next one is the way the light was hitting us, that's our bodies, and our shadows are casting into the field. And I had to catch that because I just can't stop taking pictures when I'm excited, so I had to capture how long we looked. But it also shows you a few people in the picture. So it's myself with our 3 kids. And the great timing was my spouse, he'd been here in London doing blood donation, and he got out earlier than he thought, and he saw the balloon. So he had also kind of sped down the road, and he joined us there too. And then our neighbor, who's 19, he hopped off his lawnmower onto his 4-wheeler, and he rushed down. So this is actually a shadow of a spontaneous neighborhood meetup where we're all spread out talking in the field. And I just love it because when our neighbor was younger, he spent so much time with our kids, especially our boys. And it's difficult to get time together with different stages of teenagers. And it just felt like such an awesome gift to have this time together because we reconnected over the inventions they used to make when they played together. And we heard about his new apprenticeship and how he's fixing up his truck. And I know that our kids just soak up that time with him, and it's such an important thing. So these little spontaneous meetups make me feel that maybe God's on our side in little spontaneous ways all the time. So the next slide shows a tiny little ribbon, and that's all that's left of the fabric before they're done. And this reminded me of the part that I like least about camping, and that's when you have to very carefully roll up all of the things to fit into a bag this size. Well, there's a lot bigger bag for a hot air balloon, but they had some specialists that knew what they had to do. So this balloon is all folded up and getting ready for its next adventure. And the whole part that happens here is this whole choreography. It's kind of a ballet of all the staff that do all the parts to make it get rolled up very carefully and packed up so it can be inspected for its next flight. And I still can't believe that something that was so big 20 minutes ago is now rolled up the size of a large sleeping bag at a campsite. So it got tucked back into its trailer and headed back to the shop. And I just can't help but marvel every time I look at the different stages that this thin layer of silky fabric can make for this night of peaceful beauty in a season that so badly needs a little bit of extra beauty. And there's one more slide, and that was from behind me because I'm a sunset person. Some of you might be sunrise people. I'm more of a sunset person. And we couldn't leave. We lasted long enough to see the sunset, and the bugs were biting. But it was just such an awesome night to be outside and having nothing else to do but focus on this fun thing that happened. So we had a row of neighbors all along the road who'd come down the road and they were watching from their cars. Eventually everyone packed up from all their viewpoints. But it just seemed like what the greater Belmont needed, a little bit of a miracle instead of another tornado. We were pretty thankful for that. So it seemed to me that the balloon showed up at a very good time in our week, and also my preparation for today. And along the way, I thought of some other signs of God's presence near us in different storms of life and the interactions we have. So the next slide is from St. Thomas. And Grace Cafe is a breakfast and lunch program that offers the fruits of the Spirit in the form of food and company for folks who are struggling in the streets of St. Thomas, and there are many folks who need this kind of support. And the timing of last week was such that I had a lot of frozen bread. We get bread at Trinity to share with the community, and food programs are different. So I had brought some home to find a home for it. And my freezer was packed full, and I needed to find a home for it. So I slid by Grace Cafe to see if they could use it. And I don't know how this happened, but Ginny, the manager, had this relief in her eyes above the mask. I was trying to tell her where it came from and the source, and she didn't even have time. She said, "We're literally running out of bread. We always have bread, and today we had none left." So it just seemed like that was a perfect thing to be able to offer that little trunk full of bread to someone else that needed it. So it seemed like perfect timing and a bit of relief to another person's storm, just in God's time. And this one is pretty special to me. The next picture is my friend Kelsey. So my friend Kelsey is here in her natural habitat. She loves to grow crops. And she knows we're talking about you, so it's okay. So she's a farmer. She advises folks on how to grow better crops, and this is where she loves to be, is out in farm country. She loves to be outstanding in her field, like all farmers do. She grows her own crops too, traditional crops like wheat and corn and soybeans, and her favorite of all is pumpkins. But the next picture shows a different part of Kelsey's year. So this year she had to take a break from growing pumpkins and take a break from work and a break from growing her normal farm crops. And she's right in the middle of a very significant storm in her own life. She learned this winter that she has a brain tumor, so all of her plans were halted. So she could move back home with her dad and prepare for surgery and then radiation, and chemotherapy is up next. So she named the tumor Bob, and she's decided to do whatever it takes to evict Bob from the space he's taking up in her brain. So you can tell right away she's got a sense of humor at all times, so she's really focused on getting Bob out of her head. But what else added to the storm? It wasn't enough that all these things were happening. We had to layer on a pandemic, and so that meant that all treatments were paused indefinitely. So again and again, she's received difficult news and delays, revised plans, and that she still continues to see the good and be the good in so many situations. She's very active on social media, and she just persists in posting hope and light and whatever it takes to get her through the day, which ends up supporting the rest of us too, which is pretty awesome. So her huge network in the farm community is now rallying with fundraisers, virtual walks, and selling equipment painted pink to raise awareness. And she's designed some t-shirts that say, "This is my crop top," because she's a crop girl. So people are buying her crop tops that have pictures of crops on them, all the soybeans and corn you can handle. So everyone's buying those and sharing their support of her eviction process for getting Bob out of her head. And we do hope that all the messages of support are increasing the outreach that's needed and the awareness and hope for people in her situation. I know she's on many prayer chains, personal and otherwise. People are all praying for her healing and her strength in keeping up this journey. And yet she's still modeling vulnerability and explaining her hard days so people will understand the process. And she's keeping up her strength when she can by enjoying crop tours with her dad and gentle fitness as her treatment allows, getting out in nature. And yesterday she posted about doing her first, she called it a jog. I think it was a slow jog, but she's getting back out there and keeping her body fit as well as she can. And she makes little videos and posts her favorite song lists that help her get through the days. And she has made a lot of time for reflecting in nature and keeping connected to her virtual support network across the country. I just think her online gratitude practice is just awesome. She publicly thanks almost every specialist that comes across her path and leaves a trail of positivity in her wake. I have to think that she's noticed God at her side in her own spiritual life, and that what she's spreading through her strength and hope and joy in these interactions, that she's spreading some of her own sense of the Spirit moving in her in this incredible journey of treatment and recovery. So none of us are immune to these storms in life, the situations that leave us feeling pursued. I think we have one more slide, actually. Perfect. The situations that leave us feeling pursued or scared or fighting to hang on. These storms may be short and they may be long, and we might feel scared and fighting. And some of them carry on longer than we could even imagine. But let us not forget to notice these signs of God's timing in a beautiful balloon over the horizon, or a loaf of bread that multiplies to somehow share with another town, or finding the good and the hope in the tiniest moment in the longest day of a terrible time of treatment. When these moments happen, feel your spirit lift and notice the gifts. God is somehow every day at our side. Our help is in the Lord and in the Son, Jesus. May we all find the ways to notice and give thanks when we do. May it be so.